and welcome. This is episode 1 of Musician Mindset with Jeff and Coop. Hey, Coop.
Hey, Jeff. How you doing?
Yeah, good. How are you?
Are you in quarantine in your basement?
I am. They locked me in here. Actually,
they won't even let you up to the rest of the house, right?
Yeah, only if we're playing Fortnite. I can get out virtually. How you doing?
God, I can't complain, man. It's a beautiful day here. I've got these windows I can look out at the lake, and it's sunny, so it's really nice. And I just did a Instagram live fireside chat. So I talked to Danielle Kuhlman, and it's up there on my Instagram live. I mean, she's got some really positive things to say about the horn and about her mindset and how she approaches the horn. It's just really fun to hear her talk. So
that's awesome. That might be the first thing we can talk about. We have David Ohanian standing by. We will David.
Hello.
This is David.
Can you hear me?
David.
Can you hear me? I'm
really well.
Oh, great. Hi, Dave. Nice to meet you, even virtually.
Yeah, I know. This is our first time actually meeting. This is I grew up listening to the Canadian Brass, so this is a huge honor for me.
Wow, that's well, that seems like ancient history, but I'm going to be really enjoying this as a listener, probably more, at least as much as a participant.
Yeah, excited to get your stories on all of this. David, do you have any? So maybe we dive in and talk about David for a minute. And then we had some technical excitement getting online. So we stumbled online with our special guest right away. So let's start with David, maybe talk for about a half an hour, and then maybe Coop and I can share take some other questions on Facebook.
Absolutely.
Or we'll just take this first episode to. David.
Yeah. I was thinking about, your invitation and the request to talk about a little about what I grew up, what the influences were on me, and I know that I realized
maybe Coop and I can share some other takes.
Sorry.
Yes,
David.
And it was I realized that I'm from a different generation now, and I thought I would talk about the influences that I had when I was, a young player and student and a young player. One of the things, the top orchestra players, of course, were on my mind, and there was Jimmy Chambers in New York, there was Mason Jones in Philadelphia, Myron Bloom in Cleveland. And what did I say? And Phil Farkas in Chicago, and nobody really mentioned the Boston brass section. So for some reason, I went to Boston. I actually had heard the Boston Symphony live in New York and appreciated what I heard there. But so I ended up going to Boston, but the two probably most formative players in my upbringing were not orchestral players, but they were very fine players in their own right. And those were John Barrows and Vince DeRosa. When I'd hear these guys play, it was quite magical. And of course, few people really talk about them, it seems, anymore, but Barrows was a very versatile player, and I knew about his playing through the recordings of the Alec Wilder sonatas and some other chamber music, New York Woodwind Quintet, and he had a magical musical approach, fabulous sound, and Vince DeRosa was just a commercial player. He played in on the TV shows that I watched. He played movie soundtracks. He did an album with Lorenzo Almeida, the guitarist, playing some Bach pieces. And he did a lot of stuff, but not symphonic stuff. But those two guys, to me, represented American horn playing more than anyone else at that time. Now we're talking, the early 60s. and going into the 70s. So it was a bit of a different approach for me. I mean, as far as recordings, there was Dennis Brain. That was pretty much the only recording. You know, there were no Radovan Vlatkovic and Herman Bauman. They just weren't out there. Even Techwell had not started recording yet. So if I wanted to listen to a horn soloist or wanted to listen to a Mozart or a Strauss concerto, it was Dennis Brain. That was it.
So if you're, I mean, this is great, and these names, and we can find these recordings on, and the young players that are listening now, what kind of stuff would you want to tell them for their mindset on training, or what you had to listen to? Sorry, I'm getting ahead. I would like to share with, if anyone who doesn't know, this is Dave Ohanian, who played, 12 years in the Boston Symphony?
Yeah.
As third horn, and a founding member of Empire Brass, and 12 years in Canadian Brass. And he's been quite a thing to shake on my shoulders, because he's very famous in this quintet called Canadian Brass that I'm in now, because he memorized everything after one reading. And every time I take 8 weeks to memorize something, well, David could do it. So it's a love-hate relationship with David. Welcome, David. But as far as your mindset on getting into music and what today's artists could be doing to get a career in music, what would you tell them to do more of and dive into, and that you did or would do?
Well, I think that you need to know the standard that's out there. And so I think listening to as much as you can is probably the most important thing. I mean, I'm blown away by the American horn quartet guys.
Yeah.
And that to me, they have notched it up a level that was beyond really my comprehension when I was growing up as a student. Certainly I think overall, the level of playing, orchestral playing, has gone up in orchestras. The brass playing, the string playing, everything, the ensemble. The conductors have not gotten better in my judgment. In fact, I think they're not as good, but maybe that's because of my perspective.
That's my sister laughing in the background. She married Dave Ohanian, and she plays second bassoon in the Boston Symphony. Hi, Suzanne.
Yeah. She just went upstairs again. She just came down to give us a laugh, and then she retired again.
Nice.
You're giggling in the background.
So that's sort of my general outlook. I certainly think that listening to what it is that you want to do is very important. And if you want to be an orchestral player, do that. If you want to be a soloist, do that. If you want to be a chamber player, then you do that. But I think it helps to find input from all different possible sources.
Well, I think the question I had for you is, how do you decide that you want to be a horn player in general? I mean, like, first of all, like, how do you decide that, like, music, professional music, is like a path that you can pursue and that you'd actually, I mean, how did that work for you?
It worked for me. I was from a family of musicians, as Jeff is. My father was a music teacher, violinist, and public school music teacher. My mother was a pianist, organist, and also taught. So music was in my house when I was growing up. It was in my ear. When I was, so I found horn fairly early on. And when I was 16, I won a scholarship to study in Fontainebleau with Nadia Boulanger's school over there. And so I was exposed to really excellent instrumentalists, singers, and that sort of raised the bar for me right there, because I was part of that, and that was at age 16, that was a big thing. So I know that my father used to say that as a music teacher, you don't want to encourage people to go into music. What you want to do is make them appreciate music, give them the opportunity to appreciate music and to be consumers of music. That you should only go into music when you just don't want to do anything else more than you want to do that. Wow. Then it's a draw that is irresistible.
Wow, that's great advice for young people. I mean, just like, obviously listen more and love it, and then if you can't do anything else but play music, then pursue it like you wouldn't pursue anything else.
Yeah, that's exactly
That brings
right.
up a big thing I see going on too with current teaching. That people might call it this generation or whatever. That there are so many things they can do, and they grow up excelling and being very good at a lot of things. But I think also maybe what you're saying, David, is that there comes a time where you have to choose to get, if you're doing 10 things and you put your time to it, they get this good. If you put
Yeah,
all that time into one thing, then it can be good enough for you to play professionally or be able to make a career doing music, which is what been amazing for the three of us. But there's a
yeah,
point where people who are good at a lot of things, you got to choose one thing and let go of the other things. Go to that one thing so much that you end up letting go of the other things. But
Yeah.
that's
like
that passion of
what
excellence.
what you just described there kind of reminded me of the story of Charles Kavalowski, who was the principal horn in Boston before Jamie Somerville. So, like from '72 to '97, I guess he was principal, and Kavalowski was an amateur horn player, and he studied with Chris Luba and a bunch of other people.
Chris
But he was actually a nuclear physicist, literally a nuclear physicist, and he worked in Spokane. He taught, and and at night, instead of coming home and playing with model trains, he would take this horn and go into the closet and and practice because he was fascinated with it. It was like kind of the ultimate mathematical computation for him to become a horn player. And eventually he studied with different people and they didn't want to teach him anymore. And he kind of realized that he was so good that he didn't really have to study with people anymore. And he wanted to kind of put himself in play. So he auditioned for, I guess it was Spokane Symphony and San Francisco and Boston all at the same time, and eventually came to Boston. So he was already established in his career, but he loved the horn and he loved playing so much that it pulled him into a completely different career, sort of in mid-career.
Huh. And that attention to detail served him in two passions
Yeah,
to a high enough level, right?
yeah.
Very similar thing, the learning aspect of it.
Mhm, mhm.
How about you,
Well,
David?
well, Dave, I really wanted to know, how did you get involved with the Boston Symphony? I mean, can you tell us a little bit how you made your transition from being a student into a professional realm, and what that leap was like for you? And then, I mean, assumably Boston Symphony wasn't your first audition.
No, no, it wasn't. It wasn't my first audition. Actually, Chicago Symphony was my first audition,
Right.
Jeez, yeah.
and I ended up winning that audition. So at the same time,
Okay, so you're not like the rest of us who've taken like 40 auditions.
no, I guess I had success early on. The story starts a little bit before that, because when I came to Boston because I wanted to study with Staliano. I thought that he had a certain magic when he played, and I wanted to study that. Now, people, if you were a brass player, if you were a promising brass player, you didn't go to study in Boston in 1963 when I started school as a freshman. You went to Juilliard, or you went to Curtis, or you went to maybe Indiana, but you didn't go to Boston because that was not a great brass section there. But somehow I went there, and I had a girlfriend in New York City, and so in the summers I went to work in Giardinelli music repair place in New York City, and I heard as I was repairing trumpets and French horns, I heard these players come in who were making big money freelancing in New York, and I was thinking, they don't sound that much better than I do. I think there's a chance for me. So I was encouraged by that, and then I graduated from college from a New England Conservatory, and I was freelancing. So I was sort of the top call in Boston at the time. So I was freelancing for a couple of years. During that couple of years, the Chicago audition came up. I took it, and I ended up winning it. And at the same time, Boston offered me a position because their horn section was in turmoil at the time, and I ended up choosing Boston. So I may be the only brass player that's ever won the Chicago Symphony audition that didn't take the job.
Oh my gosh, man! Wow, that's great. What position was it in Chicago?
Well, the opening was for assistant, but after I won the audition, they liked what they heard and they said, "You're on track for associate."
Wow,
But I never got to play with them.
man. I mean, it would have been a different story. You'd be here in Chicago now, and we'd be, doing an actual in person. Well, we wouldn't be doing it in person with the quarantine, but
And I've talked, I've since
We'd have Dale on as the Canadian brass hornist, I think. Yeah.
I've since gotten to know Dale a little bit, and I've talked with him, and actually we played together in Super World Orchestra in Japan, and out to dinner one night we were walking home, and he said, "You made a mistake by not coming to Chicago." That was one of the greatest compliments I had ever received.
Wow. So after you got in the Boston Symphony, you played with many of the great conductors. I'm sure you probably worked with like Seiji Ozawa a bit. I'm sure you worked with like many of the up and comers. Did Bernstein ever conduct Boston at that time?
Bernstein conducted a lot, and I actually came in under Steinberg, who William Steinberg was music director for 2 years, and I came in. He brought in a lot of people. There was about 10% of the orchestra that came in in that 2 years. Bernstein came a lot, and I always felt that Bernstein was the greatest conductor that I ever worked under, and I had worked under a lot in my career. And and people ask me that, and they say, "Who was the best conductor?" And I say, "It was Bernstein." They say, "Why?" And I think the reason is that as professional players, we know what we're capable of. We know the envelope in which we can operate, and we don't go outside that envelope, because we know what we can do, and we know what our limitations are. And sometimes those limitations are quite large, but we don't want to go outside them. Bernstein got these great performances because he would constantly try to pull you out of your envelope and say, "Go for it. Take a chance. I'll love you no matter what happens, but I want you to go for it like you've never gone for it before." And that's how he got these performances that were like 110, 120% of what the orchestra was normally capable of, because he gave you that confidence that you could go outside your comfort zone and go for it, and he would still love you no matter what happened. You might strike out, you might hit a home run, but either way, he was going to love you no matter what.
Isn't that great?
That's amazing. Did you take that? How did you took that to chamber music as well? In what ways did you do that? You must have kept that with you when you went in for Empire, and then all your years with Canadian brass.
Well, the difference with chamber music is that you have no conductor. You're the conductor. You're the performer and the conductor at the same time. You're shaping the performance, and you're contributing to that performance. So I think it's fair to say I did take a bit of that, because what you want to always do is go for the best possible output that you can, as if you're playing 110% every time you play. Otherwise, you can't have respect for yourself.
Yeah. David, may I ask a question? When you started playing brass quintets professionally, the repertoire wasn't that large. And I'm just thinking it must have been a little bit daunting to leave this really secure major orchestra job and say, "You know what, I've got this quintet that I really like, and I believe in it, and I'm going to quit playing in a orchestra and getting a check every week." Yeah. How did you take that leap of faith? And also, could you talk a little bit about adding to the repertoire so you had more music to play?
It was exactly that. It was a leap of faith. And my father, who was a child of the Depression, thought I was making a big mistake. His dream as a violinist was always to be in the Boston Symphony. He was from Boston, and he never was good enough. My wife was my then wife was not too happy about it either, because she had the kid and the house and the white picket fence, and that was just fine with her. And but I had this thing inside of me that just said, okay, well, I can see through this tunnel the rest of my life if I stay in the Boston Symphony. I know exactly what to expect. And I'd been in it for, 10, 11, 12 years. And I said, I just believed in myself enough to make that leap of faith and to believe that what we had was going to carry me on to the next phase of my life.
Wow.
With respect to the repertoire, it's true. The music written for brass chamber music is either very old or very new. And since about the 50s, the music for brass it's been a composer's forum up until like the 1970s. And it explored new sounds and different combinations and different techniques, and that a brass quintet, which was a recognized format, but the music was all either very new or very old. Petzel, Holborn, Samuel Scheidt, or it was Botza and Malcolm Arnold and composers that were contemporary, mostly living composers. That's sort of how Empire started. We started by doing things what we thought better than anybody else had done them, but it turned into a forum for new sounds as well. And then the influence of the Canadian brass was irrefutable at that time. And what they did is they just played music that they liked, and they transcribed almost everything. And audiences seemed to like it. And after all, you have to have an audience for your product. And they developed that idea of playing music that had lasting value, even though it wasn't for original instruments. It was music that was good music. It's like Fiedler used to say. He says there's only two kinds of music: good music and boring music. And we didn't want to play boring music.
Wow. Jeff, I know you took that leap of faith too. How scary was that for you to leave the Vancouver Symphony, which was, Canada, probably one of the most beautiful places in the world, and it's a fantastic orchestra job. And then all of a sudden you're just like, here I am, but I think at that point, the Canadian brass was really a legendary, group.
Are you asking or are you telling, David? You can't answer your own questions here. I got to start the grief giving at some point. But you're right. Yeah, it was definitely that. It was a very easy choice. I had been playing fourth horn in Vancouver for 3 years, and then I had won the principal position and was going to go back there to play principal. And Bramwell Tovey, who's now a longtime friend, he had written pieces for us with Canadian Brass after he was about to be the music director in Vancouver, and we were going to be working together. And then I had to call him in August and say, actually, I'm not coming, but here's why. And he was like, I understand, go for it. And it was a very easy leap to a dream, more as a brass player than as a Canadian. It was just, I got to meet these guys and then to get to play. It's an incredible dream and an incredible opportunity to keep bringing that repertoire growth opportunity forward to the world, and all these things that I think you and I, David Cooper, are going to talk about throughout our podcasts together, sharing that. But yeah, chamber music has been such a vehicle. We're fortunate at this time as well, and what's happening with orchestras versus for us, we could luckily move our concerts, and we're doing these events and can kind of turn a little bit more agilely than an orchestra can change directions and change principles.
Dave,
so that's
would you mind talking a little bit about the differences between Empire Brass, which was a newly established group, and then joining Canadian, which was maybe more of a well-oiled machine?
I've never heard of what is it called?
Empire Brass. Yeah, I think Empire Brass was basically formed out of a group of people that were at Tanglewood, and the nucleus of it actually was when the tuba player and when the trumpet player were asked by Bernstein to go to Washington to premiere Bernstein's Mass. They played the Mass, and there was actually three of the players there. they played the mass, and then and they were rehearsing it, and then at intermissions they just pass out brass quintets and play some chamber music. Oh, there it is.
Oh man, there's Sam.
Hey, way to
There's-
go, man.
Wow, look at that.
That's Charlie Lewis on the left,
Yep,
and
Charlie.
Ralph Smedvig on the right. Both were
Yep.
members of the Mass, and Sam, of course, was also. They were in the Mass,
Wow, look at that.
the Bernstein Mass, and that's actually a picture of Mark Lawrence playing trombone. He was
Wow.
a substitute member for a year. Fabulous player who spent his career playing principal in San Francisco. And so when that group came back to Boston, and they started, they wanted to fill in a horn player. And so they called me. I was newly in the Boston Symphony, and I said, sure, I'd love to play some brass chamber music. So that was the formation of the group. And so because we were sort of in orbit around the Boston Symphony, it was assumed that we were formed out of the Boston Symphony, but actually during the time that from the beginning of the group, I was the only member of the Boston Symphony. Then Rolf Smedvig won a position in Boston, and then Norm Bolter, the trombone player, won a position in Boston. So that it became known as a group that was formed out of the Boston Symphony, but it actually happened the other way around. The members were members of Empire and then became members of the Boston Symphony. But the influence was strong, and the symphonic influence was strong because we wanted to sound like a little orchestral section. We wanted to blend and do a lot of note matching and sort of get into each other's sound the way an orchestral section does. And when I transitioned to Canadian Brass, their sounded different, and that was okay. They had a blend, but if you get deeply into the sound of the group and analyze the group, they all sounded very different. The tuba playing in Canadian Brass, Chuck's tuba is a much smaller, more compact, lighter sound. And the trumpet players were much more of a soloistic kind of sound with a lot of core rather than an orchestral sound where you try to get the widest kind of sound that you can. So it was different. I think it's a pretty fine difference if you're just listening to the group, but their ability to play together and to sort of move like a school of fish, how you don't, or a flock of birds where they all move in a different direction exactly together, was quite astounding. And that was a very admirable quality, one that I learned a lot. I learned a lot from that group, learned a lot from both groups.
You contributed a lot as well. How many albums do you know?
25, I think,
25.
during the time, including repackagings. Yeah, about.
These
25.
are my sister's two favorite pictures of you. Is it still sharing?
I'm here.
And then Suzanne, there's your favorite.
Oh yes, I love that one.
Yeah.
We were all pretending to be different
Oh, yeah.
composers at the time.
Right. Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
good.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was quite a leap to join, but it was. Thank you for doing that, David. So what would you tell someone doing their chamber music now as far as diving into mattering and giving some value?
Well, I know that the Canadian Brass philosophy was always that, we tried to play music that we could be proud of, but also that audiences would appreciate. And I think that in that regard, we had only scratched the surface of what is possible. And you see that in groups like what's the Dutch group?
Mullen?
Calyx or
Calyx, yeah. Oh no, no, it's not. Califax.
Califax.
Yeah.
It's a group of woodwind players
Woodwind.
that play,
Wind.
orchestral arrangements and different interesting sounding music. Very unusual collection of players, but fabulous musicianship and fabulous ensemble playing.
Yeah.
So that's another example. I mean, it's a wide open field. You can just, if you're playing something that you believe in and that you really is good quality material, you can make a contribution to the world of chamber music with that.
Could we take a couple questions from the air? Lisa Nelson, Jeff, do you know who this is?
I don't know who's that.
Lisa had asked
on the
a question about how to be joyful and happy while you play something from memory on stage and not just constantly worrying about, am I gonna, hit the fork in the path? It seems like memorization is easier for you than some, but could you talk a little bit about your memorization of the shows with Canadian?
About my memorization? Yeah, memorization was never a problem for me. In fact, I don't know. I never really tried to memorize something, but I just don't understand how if you hear a piece a few times, you don't know how it goes.
It's infuriating.
And if you know how it goes, then you just play it.
Wow, Jeff, maybe that's a question.
My approach is more listening to the piece 8,000 times and getting, so there you get that first bar memorized, and then another 8,000. Yeah, it's a lot of work. Yeah, for me. And it's having it on the background so you live with it. But anyway, David, go ahead. Please give us your process. Yeah.
We did do, in Canadian Brass, we did play a lot of things from memory. And sometimes, I remember, I don't think Gene Watts is listening, but he would forget how his part goes. So if I was resting, I would just play his part until he got back on track, and then I'd play my own part again. And he was constantly astounded as how I could do that. I said, I don't know what you mean. I hear all the parts and I hear how my part fits with that. So when something's missing, I hear that it's missing and I just fill it in.
That's
just
awesome.
like that.
David, I used to really like you. It's really nice. We're clear now.
My reading skills are very poor, but my memorization is excellent.
Yeah, man. So, and is there a thing you did early on, maybe that you could akin to being able to literally play by ear? I think I can sing the other parts, but I can't have the right buttons down, and that's quite an inhibitor. But is there
that's a good point. One thing that
trying to hate you less.
We need to do. One thing we need to do is to, I think, listen to jazz players and try to play jazz, because really what jazz players are is they are so intimately familiar with their instrument that whatever they can think of in their head they can translate immediately to playing and coming out their bell. So even if you're not very good at it, the idea that if you can hear a melody in your head and then play it through the instrument right away, that's a very good skill to learn. Jazz players are composing as they're playing and composing and then playing instantaneously. I mean, that's a great skill to develop.
Wow. Yeah. So that connection where it's just the instrument and there's no in between. It's like your head, your heart, and then the sound, right? The instrument's just part of your body.
That's right. That's right.
Wow. Could you talk a little bit about anxiety? I mean, I'm sure you've had sold out, arena concerts and stuff like that, or live television broadcasts. I'm sure you felt nervous in your own way. Or maybe it was just.
I feel very nervous. Yes, David. He's talking about memorization with David Ohanian. I feel a lot of anxiety. I could go ahead, David.
Memorization is not all it's cracked up to be. It really doesn't make you play the notes any better.
Right.
But I think what I came to in my own head in really high stress performances is really essentially what Jeff teaches with his Fearless class, is that when you walk onto the stage, you walk across a line out into the public view, you leave a lot of baggage behind you. All you can do is the best that you can do. And you would like to be perfect, but we realize that nobody really is. Well, okay, maybe there's a couple. But you just have to leave it off stage and do the best that you can. And that frees you, I think, from a lot. Also, the first mistake frees you a lot from the anxiety. You know, you go, okay, I have not performed perfectly, so now I can go on and just do the best that I can.
Wow. Thank you.
Yeah, that's awesome.
wonderful.
And then that's such a literal playing out of who you are backstage when you're practicing. I love, there's a saying, prayers are rarely answered on stage.
Oh, that's good.
You know, and we'll
That's
never hear your third version like that.
That's
And that has to be a part of every note we play backstage. The big dangerous thing is when you walk out on stage and decide this time matters more. Is what you just haven't
Right.
made all the other times
Yeah.
matter enough.
That's
You know,
right.
Right.
Just
And-
get into
and the-
that. Yeah.
And the three of us all know that it's not that we play perfectly, it's that we cover our mistakes really well.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. David, could you just tell a couple experiences that you might have had on tour with the Canadian Brass or throughout your career? I would love to just hear like some of the behind the scenes interactions. I'm sure you guys had lots of fun.
Oh,
And,
we had we did. We had a good
great relationships.
a good experience in Empire Brass. When I was in Empire Brass, we toured in a motorhome. It was a big motorhome, and so one of our concerts was in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho.
Yes.
It was a community concert. We played a lot of community concerts, and we played this concert in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. So generally, what we would do is we'd drive into town. We had a roadie. We'd drive into town and we'd scope out where the high school was, or if that was where we were going to play, and then we'd go to our hotel and unpack and get showered and get ready for dinner, and then go to the concert. So this particular day, we headed into town mid-afternoon. We found out where the high school was, and then we went to our hotel. And as we were disembarking from the motorhome, a couple of police came up to us and asked us to stay in the van, looking slightly threatening, and asked us for all our IDs so that we could identify ourselves. And so we did that. We got back in the van. We looked out the window and we saw that around the ridge there were police cars with rifles trained on us. So this was kind of exciting. So after 5 minutes, and they had checked our licenses and they checked our IDs, and came back and to us and to tell us that we were free to go. They stopped us because there were cop killers in the area, and all they knew that they were in a vehicle with Boston plates on it, with Massachusetts plates on it.
Wow.
So
And you had lots of like gun cases, like from The Godfather.
right, they thought
I
they
bet
were
you-
their men.
Yeah.
Sweating
like
up a
weapon.
storm.
That was
David,
close- that was close.
It seems like the police follow you in quite a few places. My sister Lisa tells a story in Amsterdam where the police were running around. Was that you in this concert? Where they chased a guy over the stage, through the concert hall, and there was a thief. Maybe you weren't the hornist at that point. Were you?
I don't remember that.
Okay,
I don't think
Lisa.
that was me.
Okay, there's a
A good
concert in
transition.
Amsterdam where a thief ran in and over the stage, and you guys just kept playing, and two policemen went up and over after them, and it just
I
kept
think
on going.
I think I heard that story from Lisa, but I don't think I was the horn player.
Or you were
that-
so focused, you didn't notice.
Yeah,
You
so
checked.
yeah.
Dave, what was your time like overseas, like abroad? What was your first concert like in Japan? I'm sure like it must have been really interesting traveling without Wi-Fi or the internet or like translation
Yeah.
devices. How did you navigate through some of these countries that didn't, maybe like they weren't all instantly fluent in English?
The Japanese concerts. Well, I first went over to Japan with Boston Symphony, and of course, there's no interaction necessary in that regard. But when you go as a brass group, they identify much more strongly with that because a lot of them play really well, and they play in brass quintets and they play in woodwind quintets, and their musical training is at a very high level. So the personality cult is much stronger, and I think Empire is still going to Europe.
Wow.
It's not, it's music can be a language unto itself. And so the playing is kind of a substitute for the lack of language skills. I found that I never had a problem connecting with players over there as long as we had the music in common.
Wow.
There's a question from online Cameron Ray. Hi, Cameron. How you doing? Nice to see you on here. He asks you to talk about the horn, balancing it within a quintet and the role of that and the use of what's important about the horn when
well,
those
you
melodies out.
can speak to that too. I would just tell you that I always considered that the horn in a brass quintet was kind of like the meat in a sandwich. You know, you're kind of the middle part, and you contribute a lot to the general breadth and depth of the sound, of the overall sound of the group. And it's kind of funny because I did a lot of woodwind playing, but when I was freelancing and before I got into Boston Symphony, and I would characterize it by saying, you know, in a woodwind quintet, you generally can't play loud enough, but what did I say, woodwind? No, in a brass quintet, you generally can't play loud enough. And in a woodwind quintet, you generally can't play soft enough. So you have that dichotomy. Oh yeah, woodwind group. There we are.
Who's the bassoonist?
That's your sister. That's your sister. Yeah. It's a different kind of playing than orchestral playing because you need to put out more core of sound. I think you need to put out more core of sound to be more of a soloist kind of a voice than a orchestral voice. Again, a fine difference, but it's something that having spent a lot of my career in a brass group, it's something that you think about.
A great time now to be able to do that with all the recordings you can play along with too. You know, Dale Clevenger in his teaching, he says you don't have to do it this way, but you have to be able to do it this way. Sort of mix it up and do as much chamber music as possible has been, I'm sure, all three of our experiences, getting to be able to do whatever we want musically in our careers eventually, or just for the enjoyment of it. So there's a ton of Canadian brass music out there to do.
And
could I ask you a little bit about your horns, like what horns you played, like throughout your career, and what your favorites were?
I played, I was a clinician for, I think, 5 different instrument companies through my career. So I'd play anything that they paid me to play. You know?
And you can make them all sound great. You know, that's just basically like a statement to say, hey, it doesn't matter what horn's in your hand as long as you're comfortable with it. You know what you want to say.
You know, that was an interesting point that sort of relates to my upbringing too, with respect to the orchestral playing of the time. Like, there was this, the 8D was ubiquitous. The Conn 8D was ubiquitous. They played it in New York. They played it them in Cleveland. They played them in Philadelphia, except I think Mason played a Crosby, but most of the other players played 8Ds there.
Dave, if you ask a question, you should stay for the answer. Dave, can you please?
I'm getting my charge cord, my maximum today.
But I played. I was clinician for Holton, Conn, for Bach-Selmer, for Yamaha, and for the Canadian Brass line when we were making our own instruments for a while there. What do I like? I like an 8D. I must say, that's still the great American French horn to me.
Do you still have one?
No, I don't have any horns anymore.
You don't have, okay. So, I mean, that's the thing is like, we always look to like you guys is like, oh man, you know, once I get to this level, man, I'm going to like be playing like awesome. And, you know, I don't think I'd ever want to stop playing the horn. You've played with all the groups, you played all over the world. And I don't think I'd want to stop. And do you still play?
No, I don't play anymore.
What?
I have a great story about that. We were here at Christmas time, and it's on the back of the mic. I'm being told I'm over-modulating.
Just sit a little bit further away from the microphone.
Okay. Hi. We're figuring out all this technology. How do I turn it? Oh, there we go. Can you still hear me? David, can
Yes.
Yeah.
good.
Yeah.
So we're on the back porch here at Christmas time, and David and I might be having a cigar. We're, of course, don't inhale. It's just, and we're with winter mittens on, and we're talking, and we talked about. I think David and I had both played in a Bruckner 7, right, with Boston
Yeah.
Symphony.
Yeah, that's right.
Bloomstead,
Yeah.
and I said, so David, do you play anymore? And he said, I did for a long time, and then he'd play a Glier concerto every 3 months or 6 months, and you got to get ready for that. I think is part of it. But the way he said this is just beautiful. So I would love to share it. That I said, do you play anymore? And David said, we did that Bruckner Boston that summer, and I put the horn in the corner, and I said, okay, I'll come for you if you call loudly enough. And it never called. He just smiled, and we went on and talked about other things. Talked about model planes and my niece and nephew that they're with.
Yeah.
It's such a beautiful way to embrace other things. And we talked about his other pursuits. He's an audiophile, so he's into really exotic speaker wires, whatever that means.
Yeah.
Wow.
I think that's true. I remember that, Jeff. And I also would put it a different way, is that having achieved a high level on the horn, I know what I can do, and I know how much time it takes, and I don't want to spend the time anymore. And I don't want to warm up for 15 minutes in the morning and pretend that I'm still a horn player.
Wow.
I did it, and I was chained to it for many years, and I was able to lay it down at age 60. Isn't that every musician's dream?
Yeah. Wow. Wow.
To walk away while you can still play.
Wow. Yeah.
Anyway, it was mine, and I was able to achieve it.
Dave, could you give us a little bit of inspiration for the younger players right now who might not have ensemble playing, who might not have lessons? What can they be doing to keep their chops up? What can they be doing to really still stay engaged and have goals? What kind of goals can they set for themselves while they're off for these 3 months?
It's been a long time since I've taught, Dave, and it's again, I would get back to saying, if you are an instrumentalist and you need a target, that you need to listen to recordings, you need to listen to other players, and find players that you really admire, that you respect, and that you appreciate, and try to emulate what you hear there. Did I answer your question? I'm not
Absolutely.
sure.
Absolutely. Listen
Yeah,
more.
and it keeps coming back, and everyone we speak to has that to be listening to. And I think that anyone who ends up having music as a career or even as a pastime or a hobby, they become experts as a result of just loving music and being able to listen to music. And now more than ever, we have more time to do that and live with that music and be making decisions about who you are as a musician. We just had Bruce Hennis visiting here. He teaches at Ohio State University, but played in Houston Symphony for a long time, and he's amazing. But he talked about taking that even just 2 seconds to think about what he called your musical blueprint. But if you don't have an idea and you hope that blowing at the rightly aimed lips will succeed, that's just a technical success. It's not a sonic success. It's doing it right doesn't mean it sounds great.
Yeah.
But if it sounds great, it means you're doing it right. I had a student who asked John Rommel, who teaches trumpet here at IU, can you sound great and not be doing it well or doing it right? And he thought about it for a second and he said, I think you can sound good, but you can't sound great. And that, again, back to how good are your ears? You will never win a job better than your ears. So it's about how well and how discerning you listen.
So I also think that, especially with modern technology, that you can't be 100% a performer and 100% a critic at the same time. You have to record yourself. You have to have other people listen to you and feedback. You can't just learn, to play in a vacuum. You need to play for yourself via a tape recording or some kind of a recording, or you need to play for other people and get feedback, and people that you respect and that will tell you the truth.
Yeah, that reminds me. Sorry, David. It reminds me of something our mother said from her voice teacher, which was, "If you're listening and the audience is listening, then who's singing?" So that's the big difference between practice and performance, is that the critic, turn it off, learn later, record yourself and learn. And so that when you cross the line on stage, you're performing and you're focused on creation and adapting if something else is going on stage or to you. But other than that, it's engagement in sharing. And then when you get off stage, learn and make it better. And same, equally destructive as thinking that was an awesome note. Ooh, that was really good. Wait, you're still playing, you know? So learning that presence of between performing and practicing.
Yeah.
What were you gonna say, Coop?
Oh, I'm really engaged in like where you're like leading that conversation of like who's on stage singing, right? It's that balance between the performer and the critic, and where do we leave the one and where do we pick up the other, and how do you learn those? So that's really,
and how well can you be a constructive critic? You know, the success collecting is a big part of, you know, what we worked on together, right, Coop?
Yes, magic
after you perform, say something you did well, and then get to what we all do really well, which is what sucked. I mean, constructive language. What could suck less?
Hey, I have a question for you, David.
Yeah, no, sorry, we don't have time for that. This is like we're the questioners here.
Okay.
David, we're losing control.
As a sort of state of the art orchestra and state of the art orchestral player, do you I gotta go. Sorry, I gotta push low power mode here. My phone is dying. Do you can you talk about how you connect verbally with your colleagues as well as musically? I mean, that is to say, like, do you guys talk about concept and about note lengths and about getting into each other's sound and how does that work? I mean, how do you make the product better as a result of that kind of interaction?
I mean, I'm so lucky to be in the Chicago Symphony with so many great mentors. I've got, you know, Jim Smelser sitting next to me, and Jim studied with my teacher, Eric Rusk. And so Jim takes me under his wing, and Jim will just say, hey, this is how we're thinking about this. You know, generally and then I've got, you know, of course, Dan Gingrich, who played principal horn for 6 years, acting principal horn. And Dan will always talk about taking more and like listening around, right? And then asserting myself less. So, and trusting everyone around me more. So he just says, like, listen to what other people are doing, imitate more, and then, you know, and try to see if you can blend more. And then, of course, Esteban and I were new to the orchestra. Esteban and I have started about the same time. And it's really great to have like a new enthusiastic principal trumpet who's like coming up and finding his way at the same time that you are. So it's really nice. We're also good friends. So when I hear something or he hears something, he says, hey, David, could we try this note a little bit longer? I say, absolutely. Or I say, hey, maybe like, could we try phrasing to this note? And so you've got these two young guys who are kind of like, all right, we're going to try to approach this in a similar way. And we discuss it. And it's so nice to have that communication on stage. But sometimes, I feel like that's not always the culture. Like the culture is like, hey, like in an orchestra, you don't say those sort of things. And we try to like, you know, kind of just listen, right? And like, okay, we didn't get this time, but we're going to get it next time. And it's so nice to have someone who like helps me and just says right away, like, all right, we're going to try to do this, or I'm hearing this. And, you know, it just makes like kind of the assimilation process in a new orchestra like much harder.
Do you find that the younger guys are more amenable to that kind of talking and interacting and trying to make the product better, and that the older guys are sort of set in their ways more, or is it?
Well, I feel that they've been doing things so well for so long, and they've been doing it so long together that they don't really need to talk about it, right? There's not that need to say like, hey, this is what I'm trying to do, because everyone's been sitting on stage and having this nonverbal dialogue for, you know, 20 hours a week for the past 20 years. So for Esteban and I find that like, hey, while we're both new, we're both kind of learning like this is how we do things, and let's get this together and let's be on the same page. I find that like he's really flexible and really like, you know, keen to like, you know, have that communication with me, and I'm so grateful for that. But I also find that the guys who've been in the orchestra and who are, you know, have all that experience are so willing to share, and they're so willing to like kind of, you know, bring me into that tradition and bring me into that new kind of.
Good.
And there's probably a vibe for you to fit into that while leading as well, as far as the role and the context of principal horn. That's the mixture and the balance that you're probably working with, you know. Reminds me, I remember, and I think it was Chicago, that we sat down to start playing, I think Mahler 6 or something, and I'm sitting next to Dale, and he plays, and the conductor stops after 2 bars, and I could feel the whole orchestra just go, oh, jeez, this is gonna be a long week. Like, didn't even play 1 bar, and he wants to talk. So David, with you asking about the dialogue, all that unsaid things. But then, and same with the quintet, with Canadian Brass, you know, I just rejoined 2 years ago, you know, joining with everyone else that are longtime members as well, that I fit into that while finding what the horn could say in my ways and fit with that, and then balance it and find what the present group wants to be doing and prioritizes, while adding what you mean and with the value that you can give along the way. So it's a lot in our group, it's a lot of playing. And the group was used to living in the same city, so playing all day, every day. We would start at 10, we'd meet for coffee, and then so maybe 9 o'clock coffee, 10:30 rehearsal till 1 or 2, go for lunch, come back at 3:30 or 4, and go till 6 every single day. So we got to play a lot and play and really learn through that experience of, as you know, David, right, playing and listening and talk about it if it comes to that. You know, that's the thing. I think that the sound, because the words are just lame utterances of sound that symbolize meaning and emotion and all those things. The music is always better than words. However, we have words as well, so we got to use them at times too. It doesn't make words bad or lame, but it's always comes down to the sound first, you know.
And then also how to be polite when, like, you know, communicating. I don't just say, like, you know,
not important. Not important.
Hey, Jeff, could you do this? Jeff, you're out of tune. Hey, Jeff.
How about playing in tune? You want to try something like that? Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
David, can you talk about who this is on the screen?
Okay, let me just look. I can see it on my phone. So I see you. I see your sister Lisa. I see Charlie Vernon.
Hi, Lisa.
I see Esteban.
Zoltan Kiss, yeah, from Manozel.
Yes,
Zoltan.
Zoltan.
When we were in Vienna.
That was in Vienna. We met up in Vienna for this, you know, this evening of fun and stories. There's Jay Friedman, and Manozel Brass is, you know, one of the premier brass ensembles in the world. They don't have a horn. Nobody's perfect, right?
Right. Yeah. We wish them luck.
Yeah.
And then here we are.
Yeah, I
my
heard them.
sister
I heard them live in Boston. I heard them in Boston.
They're phenomenal. I mean, and they're entertainers. They're just like, I feel like they're really pushing the level of what the instruments can do. And they're just, they're so much fun. But so
full of personality and everything.
Meet up in Germany and in Austria, excuse me.
In
and
Vienna,
have a really, really nice dinner. We had some apple strudel there together. You, me, Chuck, Brandon, Caleb,
who's coming into our talk here. I think he has to let us off of his computer or something.
Oh, he does. Okay.
I don't know. He might need his computer because I couldn't figure out how to host. We have Caleb Hudson here. Hi, Caleb.
Is Caleb joining us?
No, I'm going to keep him muted. We don't want to. He plays trumpet, right?
Caleb left.
And he's gone. Oh, he made me the host.
Okay, so let's see.
So that was what was that restaurant, David, where you were with Chuck and
oh man, that
Brandon
restaurant,
and everybody?
I don't. It's a coffee shop where Beethoven and Mozart ate, and that's like the famous Apfelstrudel that they both enjoyed while they lived in Vienna. So I mean, it's like the same recipe, like the same everything, the same decor, probably the same chandelier. I mean, it's just
amazing.
Be in the place where Beethoven ate.
That is
played. I think they did the Beethoven quintet premiere there.
Right, that's right, man. So if you're wondering about music, like I grew up on a pig farm, we got to do this kind of thing, and it takes us to places like that and get to share music and colleagues and longtime friends we meet up with you know, and catch up. David, it's amazing having you on.
Yeah,
and
thank
hearing
you so much for your
stories.
time, David.
My pleasure. And it's 2:00, so I have another appointment, so I'm going to beg off. But really
Okay.
great to talk with you guys, and really
Thank you,
great to meet
David.
you, David.
Hey, fantastic. Really nice to meet you, and I look forward to meeting you in person once we can be a little closer than 6 feet.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. All right. Bye.
Thanks, David. Bye.
Bye, David.
Woo.
That was
Well,
unbelievable. So inspiring.
we're still
Man.
live, Dave. Be nice. Be
Well,
nice.
I know we're still
Okay.
live. I mean, I just can't believe like how easy the horn is for him. It just seems like it was easy for him to memorize. It was easy for him to play. Like he won his first audition, the associate principal with the Chicago Symphony. Like,
This is not the review I'm appreciating right now, David. Let's not. Oh, did your phone die? No.
yeah, my phone, my phone almost died. But man, he's just really inspirational guy. And I mean, he's done it all. And he
Yeah.
retired. You know, he retired while he was still at the top, which is
Beautifully. Yeah. Yeah. And
what Farkas did
and he's
well.
just like, and it's just what you do. You go and you sit in that room for hours a day and you figure it out. And it's not a big deal to him. You just get it done and get it to a certain standard. And then at some point, he'd had enough of keeping it at that standard. And I think, you know, after he left the brass, he was, as I said, you know, doing those Glier concertos once every 6 months. That's a lot to get back into. I know for me, sharing this for our younger listeners as well, you know, I don't do anything without some good fear of a concert, you know, and having to do regular concerts and staying in. I mean, I do at time, and yes, growth for growth's sake and future things. But for you guys who are studying music and wanting to do this and haven't been given that proof that you deserve it and you get to do it, it's a much potentially scarier place. But I think, yeah, for me, I still head down, went and did it, and I had to do something with my time, and I wanted to get as good as I could get. I focused on that. When I went to the Winnipeg Symphony, I was in the third year.
That was your first gig, Jeff?
That was my first gig. Yeah, it was in the third year of my bachelor degree at McGill in Montreal, and basically, there was a audition organization that would help fund trips to audition.
Oh man, Canada's
So
great.
Not amazing, Canada.
That's amazing. Oh,
Yeah.
what a country.
So yeah, I know. So it paid my way from Montreal to Winnipeg, and then I was going home to Edmonton. So basically, it was helping me get home. And then to my shock, I won it. And we can talk more about these kinds of things as well, you know. And I was like, but I missed this, and I'll take the job. But, you know, it was so imperfect. So I walked in there, and I played, and then they told me, okay, here you go, you're a professional. And I'm like, okay, great, you know, and this is what I watch my students wait for, or you get stuck in that student mode. But then to ask yourself, could I have won that audition, and could they have been convinced into offering me that position unless I walked in there and played like a professional first without being given official permission?
Are you talking like imposter syndrome? Because I think a lot of celebrities actually go through imposter syndrome. I mean, I'll tell you, like, after I won Berlin, I was like, me? Like, am I really the guy for that job? And then, like, you know, I was sitting there, and it took me a while before I was, like, sitting on stage, like, realizing, like, hey, I'm playing this job. I'm with all these guys. I won the audition. I guess this is me, you know? And, you know, of course, I didn't, you know, end up staying in Berlin. But, like, at a certain point, you have to believe, like, okay, like, I have what it takes. But also now that I, like, have been given this opportunity, I still have to do the responsibility, the work, you know, and it just can't, like, you're only as great as your last concert, right?
Yeah, as far as how long that belief can last, like I still have bouts up and down per note, per phrase, per piece, per concert, per week of doubt, and then finding ways and then once I get some work done, I think it feels a little better. I can trust a bit more, but it is not entitled. You're not ever done that, Chase. At least I'm not. No, you're not. All of Fearless Performance stuff comes from a place of great fear and having to learn it. It's not.
Well, I mean, it's a little bit of ego too, right? Like when I get into like, man, what are people going to think about me? Like, am I good enough? And like, whatever. Like, that's just all my ego talking. And what I just have to say is like, all right, I'm going to do the work. And when I do that work, then that's going to make me feel comfortable being on stage. And I'm not going to doubt myself because I know that I've done the best I can.
Yeah. So. And within that, we find ways of walking through a balanced version of that. And you guys are doing 4 concerts per program. Canadian Brass gets to do, at least 40 maybe. We change our program a few times a year, but we get to walk out into that laboratory and try this time. Oh, okay, I won't do that again, but now I know I got to try it, in context. So that's what's so great, I think, about one of the great things about moving online is that we can perform for each other and get that experience with the knowledge someone else is listening. And for me, whether it's one person or 1,000 people, that's still me choosing for whom I choose to get nervous. So it's watching those choices.
What you said too about all right, moving online, you listed, all right, the thing about moving online now, we've got all these different people that can listen to us. How do you transfer now, how do you feel about this time as a gift? What are the silver linings that could come out of this coronavirus time for us?
Awesome. Yeah, awesome question. I've been teaching online for a long time.
Okay.
And I would always say that one thing, until this virus, before that, I would say you never take an online lesson when you're in the city that the person you're having the lesson with. If you're in the same city, you're going to do a live lesson.
Yeah.
So it's unfair to compare a digital lesson, an online lesson with a live lesson. You don't do it. It's much more fair to compare it to no lesson at all. And so you can maybe do 70, 80% of what a live lesson is, but live is always better. Great. But since we're changing now, we're having to do this or getting to do it, depending on the assessment. And it's a lot of both. There's a lot of tricky things about it as well, but to embrace the opportunities of we can only do maybe 70 or 80% of a live lesson, but we can still spend 100% on that 70% or 80% of timing and ideas about training and finding other ways of training together. I'm doing my masterclass with my students in 20 minutes. So we're going to get into a big room and do masterclass. We'll have some performers, but we also do peer performing. And David, we're going to be sharing all these things through our talks here and through the Canadian Brass website on how to, I'm calling this thing peeretting. There's peer performances and there's peer forming, but this is peeretting. I don't know. We'll see if it lasts, but it's the name.
Peer editing.
It's basically playing a duet. And I've done that all the time. What I've done before is if the student at the other end wants to play along, I've had the Mozart concerti arranged, the orchestra part arranged for one horn. And we'll make those available as well.
Fantastic.
So I play the orchestra part,
Will that be available on your website?
It is available on my website, and we're going to put it through Canadian Brass website as well.
Hey, fantastic! Wow, I look forward to those because I mean, who doesn't play the Mozart horn concerti? I mean,
right.
All of us.
And to play those other melodies, some of them we don't ever get to play. They're not in the horn part. It's so great. The slow movements, amazing duets. But so I either play the orchestra part and then I kind of ignore what's coming back because of the lag on online lessons. But the person at the other end, the student, they just hear my sound coming to them and they play along. For them, it's a full-on experience of playing together. So that's what I'm doing with my students, and I recommend our listeners to pass along. I'll make a document explaining it, but you basically scan you both buy the same duet book, and one person plays it and shuts their speakers off, and the person at the other end plays along with the sound, and then you take turns. So we could play duets all day. I couldn't play duets when I was growing up. My sisters were playing their scales on their flutes and bassoons. So.
Oh, that's fantastic. Well, Jeff, I guess lastly,
how about you though, David, on the opportunity?
On opportunity.
The online stuff. You're doing so many great online things now.
I'm just trying to reach out, right? I'm just trying to be of service and I'm trying to connect, right? I have this gift of time, and I feel like oftentimes I've been a little bit limited as to how much I put out because of how much time I have, or because, I'm really fulfilling, my obligations with the symphony. But now that I have this gift of time, I want to have conversations with my friends, have conversations with, my heroes and the people that have really helped me, and just try to bring that to people that might not have access to them. And then I also want to start donating my time to do online masterclasses and online lessons. So I'm going to be doing those on Instagram Live or Facebook Live, just giving free lessons and free masterclasses to people that want to join in. We'll do a regular afternoon masterclass, and then people can hear my experience and hopefully learn something from me.
Awesome.
But
Thank you.
Um,
So on that note, as someone who have wanted to see your last few classes on Instagram Live, but couldn't, and I'm pretty tech savvy. It's all relative. I'm sure my Canadian Breast colleagues are laughing at me right now, but I can't figure out how to see them on Instagram. I looked at Instagram Live. So how do you, and I even looked on what's called the Google. I know what the Google is. How to watch Instagram Live, and it still doesn't work.
So when you go
you
on
have
Instagram,
suggestions?
I mean, I can explain this to you again, a little bit more detailed.
What do you mean again? He didn't tell me.
I'm just saying.
Go ahead.
So did you have
Or it
Instagram
doesn't work.
downloaded on your phone? Did you get the
No,
app?
you don't have to talk slower. I understand the words. They just don't work for me. Yes.
Okay, so you basically
Wait,
just
sorry, what? Was it Instagram Live?
You go
Is
you
a
go into
separate app?
Instagram, and then you'll click on my face icon. Like, so you'll see me in front of the Chicago
I
flag.
know what an icon is. Thank you.
And
Yes.
so you just click on my icon, and it'll bring up my interview. It's actually up there all day long, and it's on my story. So you just watch my story. So
Okay.
go to the
Please,
top.
everyone, try that. And if it doesn't work, please message me so I feel better because I've tried that. Anyway, I'll see. Yay.
We're gonna work on getting these up on YouTube. I think I need to switch platforms.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
Yeah,
Cool.
I think that's just maybe a better platform for these.
Yeah. Yay. Wow.
Excellent.
Well,
Thank
this
you
is a
very
great
much.
hang.
I'm
Thank
sorry we
you
didn't
very
get
much.
More time to answer more questions, but we're going to be doing these every week, right?
Right. Yeah. Every week on
Every
Fridays.
week, 1
We're going
PM
to advertise whether it's at 12:30 or 1 p.m. We might change to 12:30 to keep
12:30 is
consistent throughout
great.
the week.
Yeah, I normally will
And
be.
you can have your lunch hour.
Yeah,
your lunch hour.
absolutely. Lunch hour with Jeff and Coop.
Yeah.
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 Hey,
Keep
thank
questions
you very
coming,
much.
everybody. Thank you so much for being here. Thanks, David. Yeah.
Who's
this
our
is great.
guest next week? Do we have a guest lined up?
I've spoken to a few people, but I haven't heard back yet, so we'll see. Yeah.
Oh, it's a
We'll
surprise.
we're gonna share it
And you
sooner
have
than
a magic
yesterday.
trick for us next week too, right?
Sure, I have one now if you want. You got 5 seconds?
Can you show us a magic trick really quick?
Okay. Ready? Remember that card I told you to pick?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Sorry, I didn't mute for that part. In every deck of cards, there are 4 of everything. 4 2s, 4 7s, 4 jacks. These are the 4 jacks, okay? David, are you there? Can you hear me?
Yeah, I'm there.
It's so focused. Out of the 4 jacks, 2 red ones and 2 black ones.
Yes.
This is totally up to you. Which ones would you like to keep? The red ones or the
Okay.
black ones?
Can I say it?
Please, it's a better trick.
The black ones.
The black ones. Okay. So I'll give you, there's the spade and there's the club. In here, we remain the hearts and the diamonds, right? Jack of hearts, jack of diamonds. Before you pick, whichever one you want to keep, that leaves 1 remaining here, and that one will turn over in its grave as a neglected child. I remember I asked Dale Clevenger's daughter, which do you want to keep, the diamond or the heart? And she says, story of my life, honey. So which would you like to keep, the diamond or the heart?
Let's go with the diamond.
You diamond. Okay. So in here, we have 4 cards, and the heart will be what ended up being neglected. Which one is that?
Oh my god.
Oh, there it is. It's on the bottom. That's why it's upside down.
That's amazing,
Ta-da.
man.
Now, it also, we knew it was going to be that. So
What?
it was from a different color deck. And the other 3 cards
Oh my god.
disappeared. Ta-da!
Yay.
We did not talk. Now, that's one of our rules. We can't talk about these tricks. I sent you some magic tricks to learn. You're on next week. You're going to do a magic trick for next week.
Yeah, you'll see me disappear. That'll be my trick.
Yeah. That's one of the things growing up, like magic's the same as music, right? You work on the techniques and you do it. But like what I just did was kind of just a trick, like I did the techniques and it's kind of cool. Same as playing an instrument well. But I still, I need to add more story to this trick and add some, tension and maybe some mysterious characters or something. And then it's magic. I just did a trick. So it's
Wow.
identical. It's really cool.
Wow. Thank you so much, Jeff.
Yeah, man.
Have
Thank you.
a
Thank you,
wonderful-
everybody. We'll see you next week. So the rest of the week we have coming up tomorrow, Saturday, 2:00. The Canadian Brass Trumpets are hanging out with Mark Gould. And he was in that same concert with the Boston Symphony and the New York Philharmonic brass sections played with Canadian brass. It's on YouTube as well, on Kavalovsky. All the people we talked about, First Horn in Boston, Kavalovsky, and David, Mark Gould, and all these guys. So they're going to talk tomorrow at 2:00 on Facebook, the same Canadian brass page. And then we have, I think it's Tuesday, trombones with Gene Watts and Achilles. Achilles is going to co-host with Gene. It's going to be amazing. Wednesday, all of Canadian brass will be back doing our thing. 12:30, and then Thursday's Chuck tuba with Jarrett, young phenomenal tuba player playing all over the place, and he's awesome. And then back here Friday for you and me again.
Fantastic. See you soon, Jeff.
Thanks everybody.
Thank you
Yeah,
again.
you too.
Thank you,
Bye.
everybody.